to the Sick of It podcast. Today we're doing something a little bit different, and our new co-host Megan, who will be joining us every few episodes, is going to be interviewing me. I just thought that since I'm here talking to you guys and the guests all the time, that maybe you should get to know me a little bit better, so that's what we're doing today. This episode is also the last before we go on a little mid-year break, but don't worry, we'll be back in early June, and I already have a bunch of amazing guests lined up for you. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I'll speak to you soon. Hello.
Hey, how you been?
Yeah, I'm sick at the moment. Again, it's what, May, and I've had a cold like twice already. Like, it's
Uh,
not yet.
we're all sick at the household here too. I'm more flare-up side at the moment. But yeah,
Yeah.
Chris has copped it. He was sick with the flu and then got better and then went out for his Bucks party, and it was his birthday yesterday and he was sick as a dog, poor bugger. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's going around, and my immune system's terrible. I just always get it. If you got it, I'm gonna get it.
Sharing the love in a different way, not the way we want.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we'll jump into it then. Are you excited?
I don't know. I'm a bit of a control freak, so I don't know. Yeah, I am, but I don't know. I don't like letting go of control that much.
Well, we've got some good questions prepared,
Yeah.
so she'll see how we go.
Right.
So, first of all, obviously, you run the podcast, and this is your first time in the question answering seat.
Yes.
Obviously, you just said you're a little bit not concerned, I suppose isn't the word, but
No.
I guess anxious about how we might roll.
Yeah, I just think, well, I've never really done an interview before. I did a project with Queensland Health, which was a video interview, but that was a bit different. That was very targeted. And other than that, like I've never been on another podcast or anything like that, except my own. So I guess I've just never done it before, really.
Well, first time for everything. So I guess let's dive in. So you've given me a little bit of information about
Mm.
yourself already, but tell us more about your diagnoses, your journey to getting those diagnoses, and let's start with that.
Yeah, so I have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or EDS, which is a genetic connective tissue disorder. So I was born with that. And I also have fibromyalgia, which is what I was diagnosed with first. That started when I was about 20, and I got diagnosed by a couple doctors, a GP and a rheumatologist. But I just kind of ignored it because I knew that it technically fit, but it didn't fit because I hadn't been diagnosed with EDS yet. So I was like, yeah, that makes sense for about 5% of my symptoms, but that doesn't really actually make sense. So I just kind of ignored it until I got diagnosed with EDS, and then was like, okay, so I have EDS and fibromyalgia because they're quite common to have together.
Mm.
The EDS journey was fine. I got diagnosed when I was 22. Um, I've obviously been sick my whole life, but I've never really actively sought a diagnosis. I suppose no doctors ever thought about trying to give me one, I guess. It was always just, here's the individual symptoms, we treat that. Like, you have surgeries to treat that symptom, that's fine. But no doctor was ever like, maybe you have something, which I feel like doesn't really make any sense.
Feel like a lot of doctors have that approach though. They sort
Yeah.
of go tick and flick, your results are fine, there's nothing wrong. And it's like magically all of your symptoms disappear with that reassurance when they
Yeah.
don't, and it just makes it harder.
Yeah. So it's just like, okay, there's a symptom that's treated, or we figured that out. Then another symptom pops up. We'll treat that and figure that out. I was diagnosed. I mean, I don't know if you technically did get diagnosed, but I was diagnosed as hypermobile from a very young age in my whole body, which in the last few years I feel like should have been a red flag because, if anyone told me they were hypermobile in their entire body and they had other medical conditions, I would be like, well, you probably have EDS or HSD, mobility spectrum disorder. But back then I understand, like, obviously the research wasn't there. And it wasn't until like a few years ago I did realize that other illnesses come with hypermobility. Like I was just thought I was hypermobile and that was it. Like I was just
Yeah. Oh, that's the thing though. Like I actually learned the same thing recently. I'm going through additional diagnosis myself,
mm,
and my occupational therapist straight up asked me if I'd investigated EDS, and I just said
yeah.
no. Like I don't know. I don't think I fit the criteria. And then she mentioned that the hypermobility can come on a
Mhm.
spectrum,
Yeah.
and it overlaps with so many other issues. And like you, I have fibromyalgia. Um, and going through all that sort of stuff and breaking it down. So it can be really hard to sort of determine what symptom lines up with what and what's actually the root cause of those things.
Yeah. Like normally with hypermobility, you know, you can get hypermobile if you say you're a dancer or you're a tennis player, but that's normally in specific parts of your body and specific joints. If someone like says to me that they're hypermobile in their entire body and they have other medical conditions going on, like that's a big red flag to me. And yeah, like the step down from hypermobile EDS is hypermobility. Oh my goodness, I can't speak. Hypermobility spectrum disorder, which yeah, they're quite similar. It's basically the step down from EDS.
Yeah. And I guess how do you go, managing both of those conditions? They're so different, but have a lot in common with each other.
Mm.
And I can understand how the chronic fatigue associated can really wipe you. How do you manage? What do you
Mm.
do on a day to day?
I try. I'm not the best at managing my health. I feel like it's been only the past few years. Like I really do think I was just like the treat the symptom and that's it. And it wasn't until I got the diagnosis of EDS that I started doing other things. I think seeing specialists has probably been one of the biggest things. Like I have been really bad at seeing her lately, but going to the physio, um, you know, we don't do any exercises or anything. She literally just loosens off my joints because basically every joint in my body is tight. I haven't found an area of my body that is not tight. And with time, that causes like increased pain and can cause problems. So I literally just go to her and she basically gives me like a really painful massage. Um,
It is very painful when you get someone who's good though and
yes.
knows what they're doing, especially with your fibromyalgia and your
Yeah.
muscles. Oh my gosh, it hurts so bad, but then you feel so much better for at
Yeah.
least a day or two
Yeah.
afterwards.
My flexibility, because you know, technically everyone always thinks with hypermobility or EDS, you're super flexible. And that's super like that is true. I used to be very flexible, but most people go through that stiffness phase. And I kind of went through that like probably in my early 20s. So now my joints are very stiff. So I'll go see her and all of a sudden I'm like super flexible after a 30-minute like appointment just because of that loosening off my joints.
Do you find that maintaining movement is a big core player in improving and sustaining your ongoing wellness with those conditions?
Yeah, I do. Like you know, anyone who follows me on Instagram knows that I like to hang around on hoops and poles. Yeah, I do think movement is a big player. I notice that my joints are stiffer if I'm not moving very much. Um, which can be hard obviously because, you know, fatigue and energy levels. Sometimes you're just not gonna you don't have the energy to do
It's
that.
a hard gamble
Yeah.
sometimes to play it off because you're trading sometimes tomorrow's energy
Yeah.
for loosening up those joints and muscles that keep you mobile, keep you moving. Which, if you do that enough times over a course of your life, especially in space of a few weeks or days, you end up with a couple of days there each month where you're just flat because you've used all of your energy and borrowed all of tomorrow's energy too many times.
Yeah, physical activity I think is my biggest hate when it comes to EDS and everything because I do really like doing aerials and dance and pole and everything, but my muscle gain is like it's like almost impossible for me to gain muscle and I lose it straight away. My fatigue levels, like, you know, there'll be a month where I'll do like 4 classes, 5 classes a week, and then I do like 1 in 3 weeks. Like, it's just not consistent.
Yeah,
And,
it catches
yeah.
up.
Yeah.
But it's great, I think, that you're even taking the initiative to go and do that for yourself, because I know there are so many people struggling with these conditions who can't find the energy to go and do
Yeah.
those sorts of activities, or even just doing a walk around the block is challenged, not just physically but mentally, knowing that you're about to exert that energy, borrow tomorrow's energy, and the payment that you're going to have to give to do that. I think that's really brave as well, and it's excellent that you're taking that to opportunity to push yourself.
Thank you. I try. It hurts, but, I try.
Oh, sometimes you think about these things, it's just like existence is pain. Like, come on,
Yeah,
bring it on.
like, the last, like, couple weeks, I'm like, honestly, I barely left my house. What is it? It's a long weekend. I've had 2 days off work. I left my house, like, 1 day, I think, out of the 5.
Yeah. Oh, it gets like that. Like, I had my bridal shower on Saturday, and it only went for a few hours, and I went into flare up after, and
Yeah,
I'm on day 3 or 4, and my leg, everything is still swollen and sore, and like I all I did was like sit and stand and talk for a few hours. It
yeah,
wasn't like I ran around or did anything crazy. Like, it's crazy how much little things can add up and really impact your body.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's what people don't understand, like, when it comes to working from home, like, with it, for example, for a job, people are like, "Well, if you're sick, you can't work from home. It's the same as not working from the office." It's like, yeah, well, I don't have to get up as early. I don't have to get ready. I don't have to drive or catch the bus there. Like, so that's a
Or
lot
the
more
stress of the
energy.
commute.
Like, it's just a lot more energy saved. So it's like, yes, technically, I'm not well enough to come into the office, but I would be well enough to work from home. But like, regular people don't really understand that.
They don't. And I think the other thing too, and when you work from home, you do also have the flexibility to work where you're comfortable.
Yeah.
Obviously, ergonomic support and a correct setup is always important. But I don't know about you, there are some days where I wake up and everything hurts and my brain is working, but I can't physically get myself to sit up at a desk for an 8-hour day. And
Yeah.
I will just comfy in bed, laptop on my lap, and I can work from bed those
Yeah,
days.
literally. I work like when I do stuff like the podcast or unless it's editing, anything, I literally do everything from the couch.
Sometimes it's just easier that way.
I don't want to sit. I have a desk, but I don't want to sit at it. I'd rather sit at the
Yeah,
couch.
but look, honestly, with these types of things, whatever can get you comfortable and productive is a win. You
Mm.
know, we all need
Yeah.
little supports and helps from time to time. And on that note, have you ever needed to use any supports or services or anything in particular to sort of help you with your day to day?
Not really. Like, obviously, I see doctors, I see specialists, I see a physio, I see a dietitian. I've never had to use like any mobility aids. I take like 10 vitamins a day at the moment. Um, and I guess the main thing was medication. Up until a few months ago, I was on amitriptyline for migraines, and well, I was put on it for migraines, but it also helped with the fibromyalgia pain. And I recently went off that, um, because my doctor was a bit concerned about being medicated for so long without being off it. I think that was like such a big help at the time. And I do
Hmm.
take medication at the moment for OCD, but other than that, I think it's just like general seeing doctors, specialists. Like, there's nothing particular that I've had to rely on. If that makes sense.
Well, that's a good thing, I
Yeah.
suppose. And you've got a really good community and network around you. So heaven forbid the day ever came where you needed that, but you'd be able to tap in for support, I'm sure. And you mentioned then OCD. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that's something I talked about before. I'm really bad at talking about mental health. um, I don't talk too much about OCD because I'm not as much of not as knowledgeable on it as like EDS, fibromyalgia, and it's more of like a newer thing. Um, but like I do have OCD and I have had it for God, probably I don't even know how long, for ages. But Um, yeah, it's not something I can talk about too much because it is still like quite a new thing. Yeah.
New diagnosis. And I think too, there's a lot of challenges tied to OCD because it's such a throwaway comment that
Yeah.
people make. It's like, oh my gosh, it's my OCD. Like, I'm just so anal on this. But like, it's not like that. It's such a much bigger thing, and the way that it can impact people varies as well. Would you say, we don't have to dive
Yeah.
directly into this if you're not comfortable, but would you say that you have very severe OCD, or what sort of level do you feel that you're at? How does it impact you?
I think it's moderate. I take Lexapro at the moment, at like quite a low dose, and that like affects it, like that makes it a bit better. So I don't know. I think I have lived with it for a very long time that I'm not always like the best judge of like how bad my mental health is. I think at the moment it's like probably a bit below moderate. Like it does take a lot of like time throughout my day, particularly like before I leave the house, before I go to bed. Like I like to check things a lot. Um, but yeah, like there was a point last year, it wasn't that great, but that's when I went off the amitriptyline and they were trying me on a different medication. I think just the medication changeovers, because they're like quite heavy medications. They're like
Mm.
antidepressants, were just kind of like messing with me a bit. But I'd say like on the Lexapro, yeah, it's like a bit like less severe, like below moderate.
And so, does it impact you mostly in the way where, as you said, it's sort of like you have to double check, triple check that the lights are off, or that you've turned off appliances or different things before bed, or you leave the house? Is that the main way that it sort of impacts you, or is it in other parts of your life as well, do you find?
Yeah, that's a big thing is like the checking. I think yeah, what people need to understand about OCD is it's a obsession and a compulsion. So you do compulsions like checking because there's obsessions, and those obsessions could be that you're in danger, or I mean they can literally be anything. They're basically intrusive thoughts. I think the thing that makes OCD so complicated is there's like many different types of OCD and they all overlap. You can have multiple, like there's contamination OCD, there's checking OCD, there's relationship OCD. You can basically have OCD about anything, and they're all different types, but you can have like multiple. So it kind of makes it hard to be like, this is what OCD is, because
It's not.
it's like very different for everyone. Like there's not a one thing.
Mm, it does make it difficult, and I guess as well, like being recently diagnosed, I guess wrapping your head around what that means, and how that can sort of be treated, and where you can identify those patterns. That must be difficult to wrap your head around.
Yeah, it's a bit of like a, I guess, a light bulb moment, like when you realize like the thoughts you have, like they're not really normal, like the, or like, oh yeah, that right, that's OCD. Okay. It's just kind of like, I guess it's something I'm used to, and then I'm like, oh wait, that's, yeah, that's that.
I guess it'll be like a process now too of identifying in your day to day
Yeah.
as well, where if you get into like a cycle, because do you find that it makes you quite anxious, or like on your edge of your seat when you get into those sorts of loops, or thought
Yeah,
processes?
I would say that like OCD and like is an kind of anxiety induced like mental illness. And I think like that's why I didn't know I had it for so long, because I think for a lot of people it could be mistaken as anxiety. And yeah, I think once you like if you feed into the compulsion too much, then it becomes like you start feeding into the compulsion more. If that makes sense. Like it can be hard. Like, yeah,
I
sometimes I
guess
walk around my house like 10 times checking everything. I'm like, okay, I already checked it 9 times. I don't need to do like a 10th time.
how do you go with that on days when, say, you're in flare up with your other conditions and you're feeling those compulsions to check? How do you cope with that?
I don't really think of them as kind of like overlapping. I don't know. Like, I guess they're just two different things. I think it's actually better sometimes if I'm really tired or sick, because I'm like, I actually can't be bothered to check. Like, if I die, I die, I guess.
It
someone
stops you.
someone
Yeah,
comes
you're
in
like, the serial killer's gonna
yeah,
find
I'm
their
like
way in. The door's not
I'm
locked.
in bed.
Don't
I'm
accept
not
my
gonna get
fate.
up again. Like I don't care anymore.
I can
Yeah.
imagine though, if you are feeling that though, and you're in one of those days when you are feeling really sick, that could be really taxing mentally for you.
Yeah, I think I got in a good habit of just ignoring my mental health. So I don't really like it's just there.
I'm not sure if that's a good habit.
Look,
That's okay though.
it's I don't recommend it. I'm fine, but like also not. Like I wouldn't recommend everyone should go see a
It's
therapist. Don't do what I do.
therapy. Therapy is great. I recommend it as well.
Yeah.
But I completely empathize with you there because really, like, I think all of us, regardless of being in like diagnosed with chronic illness or
Yeah.
disability or whatever it is, that's a catalyst and a factor that can really, cause an impact with mental
Yeah.
health. But everybody has challenges with mental health, and we all, I think, get into routines where we don't prioritize it because it's something that's like, oh, I'll deal with that later. I'll put that in the tomorrow
Yeah.
box, or I'll circle back when I need to. And over time, it just builds and builds and builds to a breaking point. And I know with fibromyalgia, I'm not sure
Mm.
with the EDS, but that can really be set off by stress
Yeah.
triggers, and emotional triggers, and it can be really, really disabling when that gets sort of set off. Do you find, I mean, I know you said you're sort of not the best with looking after your mental health, but do you do anything in particular that helps you to cope with those sorts of things, or do you kind of just fly on the seat of your pants and manage it as you go as best as you
Yeah,
can?
that's pretty much been my approach for 25 years. Yeah, I take the Lexapro and because the thing was I was taking the amitriptyline for migraines and the pain and off the amitriptyline and then my mental health got really bad and I was like and because amitriptyline is an antidepressant and even though I was taking it for pain, it's still an antidepressant and it was actually helping the OCD for like 5 years. And then I went off it, I was like, oh my God, this isn't great. So I think
There's a loophole.
so the Lexapro, I think is the first time I've taken medication just for like a mental health thing. Even though technically I was taking the amitriptyline, I just didn't know that it was
Dual
doing
effect.
anything.
I
Yeah, so I guess that's the main thing.
How do you feel on those medications? Like personally, I've actually taken both as well. I did the opposite. I was Lexapro and then on to the amitriptyline.
Yeah,
And I take the amitriptyline for my FND and fibromyalgia pain and migraines as
yeah.
well, but low dose, so it does help with the any depressive side of it. Um, did you experience any side effects on either medication, and how did you manage
Mm.
that?
So I've probably been on the Lexapro for just over 6 months now. Didn't notice anything. The amitriptyline is a little bit tricky because I started getting heart palpitations 2.5 years after taking the amitriptyline.
Hmm.
And they did a bunch of tests and they were like, no, your heart's fine. And then 2.5 years later after that, after taking beta blockers for those 2.5 years to slow my heart rate down, I was watching Grey's Anatomy
Of
and they were
course.
like, yeah. And they were like, amitriptyline causes heart palpitations. I was like, oh, does it? I didn't know that.
Oh my
And
gosh.
then I Googled it and I was like, oh, it does. And then that was one of the main reasons I went off the amitriptyline. And I went off the amitriptyline and the heart palpitations stopped within a week. And I was like, oh, so it was the amitriptyline the whole time. But then now I get heart palpitations again. So
Hard to know.
the amitriptyline, I don't know if it set off the heart palpitations or if it was the main cause because now I'm not on it and I still get heart palpitations. I started getting them again. So that was the main thing at the time, but now I can't guarantee
That was what it
if
was.
it was.
You've just raised that
Because
though, because like I actually didn't know that was a side effect.
yeah.
And it's
And
crazy.
I got really annoyed because I went and saw a cardiologist. I saw multiple
That's a lot of
doctors
money.
about this. And yes, and I didn't have a job because it was 2020, it was COVID.
Oh my God.
And then I was like, did no one read the side effects of the medication? Like the one medication I'm on, and that's literally listed as one of the main side effects. And I was like, no one read it because, whether the heart palpitations are caused by something else now or not, within a week of being off the amitriptyline, I didn't have to take any beta blockers and my heart palpitations stopped
That's
for about
crazy.
3 months until they slowly built back up again. So I was like, no one,
It's
why did I learn this off Grey's Anatomy?
like, of all places too, like, some
Literally.
of me and my friends who have like medical knowledge, we watch these shows and it's just like, I can't believe they're doing that in these shows. But then every now and then you get these little nuggets and you're just like, fact check, Google,
Yeah.
tell me, is this
I was like,
real?
why is this fictional show
Teaching me
like
about my own
treating me? I'm like, isn't that what the specialist was for?
Oh, but it's
But yeah.
such a common thing though. Like, I know you said you don't take too many medications, it's mostly vitamins, but how often do you see that a GP will just throw you on a random medication without properly informing you about the pros and cons, the side effects, and even you go to the pharmacy and they don't always give you information now. Like, it's really challenging, and something I experienced as well when I was growing up and going through my own diagnosis journey. So many doctors just put me on medications after medications, and it ended up being that we were treating the side effects of the medications rather than
Yeah.
the root cause of the problem, which sounds like what's happened there for you is they've gone, yeah, this will work for you perfectly. And then you've had a side effect from that medication, which they've added another medication to treat rather than
Yeah.
reviewing the root cause of it.
Yeah, I think a lot. Like, I think the only thing I was told about amitriptyline was it can possibly be addictive. That was about it. But my current doctor I'm seeing now, she was like quite appalled because I was on the amitriptyline for 5 years and it was for migraines. And she took me off it. She's like, well, you've been on it for 5 years. I want to see what happens
If you come
when
off.
you stop. And I started getting a few migraines here and there. And she's like, okay, like when you get a migraine, I want you to drink 2 liters of water. And then it like worked. And she's like, why did no one tell you to do, like, no one did the basics of migraine care with you when you first started getting migraines? They just put you on medication.
And I think
She's like, I don't
too,
know why anyone didn't do like basic migraine management
no.
with you
Well, I think
originally.
that's the struggle though. Like, you've got to find a GP who has the knowledge about those things. Like, it's common things that
Yeah.
happen, but so many of them don't know the basics. And you've got the other side of it where, say you're someone like us who we know our bodies really well. We come in, we say, this is all the problems, I've tried X, Y, Z. They don't offer any additional suggestions, and the medication's the fastest and easiest way to basically shut us up. Not necessarily treat us, depending on the person you're working with. And there are a lot of different things you can try for migraines. Sometimes they just don't work, and medication is the best option. But yeah, it's crazy though that you just don't get that holistic sort of look at the root problem, see what's happening in that environment, how we can try to fix things before escalating to medication. It just doesn't
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah. I mean, when I saw the cardiologist, they did two Holter monitor tests, echocardiogram, and a stress test, and everything was fine. And he's like, okay,
Yeah.
everything's fine.
It's like, obviously everything's
So
fine. Like, sorry, my
yeah.
heart's not doing the thing while I've got a camera on me. Like,
Yeah, he was just kind of like, that's it. And then I had just gotten diagnosed with EDS like a few months earlier. And it is a symptom of EDS, like heart palpitations. So I was like, my doctor and I were like, oh, could it be that? He's like, yeah. Like, he was just like, okay, yeah, it's the EDS.
oh my gosh. Well, it's the same thing
But all he
again.
had to do was Google amitriptyline.
Just Grey's Anatomy, man. That's what you got to watch. You'll get all your
Literally.
medical answers from shows like that. Oh my
I
god.
know.
So I want to swing around as well, and I want to discuss a bit more about your advocacy work, because you
Mm,
work with Champion, like I do,
yeah,
and obviously you're hosting this wonderful podcast, which I think
yeah.
is a great way to sort of pull a bit more out of people in a conversational, comfortable environment, which you do
Thank
fantastically,
you.
might I add. How Tell me more about how you got into advocacy and why you're passionate about it.
I think like it did start with my diagnosis. Like I didn't consider myself chronically ill or anything like that before my diagnosis, which technically doesn't make sense. I had the exact same symptoms and everything. But I don't know, like it's kind of hard to like it didn't feel valid. And it was very hard to explain to people, like, what do I say? Oh, I have this symptom, and this symptom. don't make any sense at all. They're not connected in any way. I don't know what it is. Like it just doesn't
Yeah.
make sense.
I feel that.
Like it just doesn't seem valid without a name or anything.
Well, that's it. It's so hard though when you're going through diagnosis too, because I'm in the same boat right now where I have some things
Yeah.
diagnosed, but there are things that don't match, and still going through that. And it's like, how can I be a voice of advocacy when I myself don't 100% know what's going on? You know, I could be speaking on, I don't know, fibromyalgia, for example, and it might find out later down the track that it's not my fibromyalgia. And so, you know, the awareness I've raised on that might not be valid or relevant. But
Yeah.
I guess, like, at the crux of it, though, you are still raising awareness and bringing attention to causes that are important and minorities of people who are suffering as a result of those conditions. And, you know, you've done so much good work in this space already, and just continuing that advocacy is such a strong thing to do, honestly. And to be able to put your story out on the line and speak openly about it, like, it helps others.
Yeah, it's a work in progress. Like I think it's not natural. Like I don't think it's natural to speak about like basically the worst things that happen to you, like especially on social media, which is very curated to like a
Mm.
very perfect image, especially maybe like 10 years ago when Instagram and all that, or whenever Instagram came around, I can't remember. Um,
Probably
when
around
everything
then.
came around and like the rise of influencers and everything, but I think we are starting to move away from that, particularly on platforms like TikTok. And we are
Mm.
starting to value more like openness, I think, online.
I think authenticity is a big draw card too, because we've been conditioned to see so much fake, and people's curated realities, which is a good word you just used. um, Seeing the real side of things can be really hard and really confronting for some people, but for others, that is, you know, that's a draw card. That is, I found my people. That's a sense of community and belonging. um, and you're right, it's not natural to put yourself out like that. But I think when people do, it's important, and we should listen. And yeah, you're giving people that voice and that platform, which is so fantastic, in my opinion. um, I suppose on that, how do you see the landscape of chronic health and disability advocacy evolving in the future? Like, what changes would you like to see, not just from that social media perspective, but in the broader sense with medical care and, just societal attitudes?
I think I would like to see people actually caring about disability and chronic illness. I think if you go up to people on the street and say, "Do you care about disability rights?" 99% of them are going to say, "Of course." Like, of course. But the truth is, and like this is going to be harsh, but it's the truth, like they don't. They actually don't. Like
Mm.
they're not their CEOs, their HR people, their employees, they're not hiring disabled people. They're not giving them accommodations. They're not making things accessible. They're just saying like, of course I care. I'm going to get angry when a young girl parks in the disabled park because I think she's not disabled enough. That's my advocacy. And it's like, no, like I actually don't. I think a lot of people actually don't care about us. And it's just, they think they do. Like, I think they do, but they don't. They're not doing anything in their day-to-day lives that does anything to affect us.
No, I think that's a big thing too, because the misconception of what a disabled person is, again, is on a spectrum, like many things are. You can be someone with an invisible disability like you and me, which can very quickly become visible. Like with EDS, if you have a dislocation or something like that, you need a walking aid or mobility aid. For me, if I have a flare up of my FND, sometimes wheelchair, cane, different things like that. But then you have the other side where people associate as being disabled, which is full-time wheelchair
Yeah.
users, or people who have an obvious physical or intellectual disability or impairment. And I think the advocacy around those sorts of things is so important to raise awareness that there is a spectrum of disability, and that it doesn't fit into a cookie cutter analogy. And I think you're completely right around attitudes of people hiring and hiring
Yeah.
positions. Because there really isn't true flexibility in most workplaces to accommodate for disability. You know, again, if you've got like a fatigue management issue, like what we have, having a full-time job is incredibly difficult. And I know you've recently transitioned back to full-time work
Mhm.
as well. Like, how are you finding that?
Um, Not good. Yeah, I'm burnt out. It's fun. Yeah, it's not good. It's not going to be sustainable for me long term. I already know that. It's just about like, when do I transition? Like, when do I request to do part-time, or what am I going to do to resolve that, and like kind of hanging on for as long
It's
as
so hard.
possible.
I think that stigma though too, like, I don't know about you, but I get really bad anxiety
Mm,
talking about that sort of
yeah.
thing with my employer. Like, even just saying, "Hey, I'm having a high pain day. I'm not gonna be on camera today for our meeting, because I'm in bed." Like,
Yeah.
those conversations I find are really difficult to
Yeah.
have.
Yeah. I think like 2 weeks in, or like 3 weeks in, I was like, I didn't tell you this, but like I have a medical condition and I'm really struggling. And I was like, they literally might fire me, like thinking they're going to fire me.
Mm.
She's like, why would I fire you? And I'm like, because you don't understand, like most employers would be like, okay, well, we've really enjoyed having you here.
Yeah,
But
we're gonna work you out of the
I
system
don't
now.
think it's working.
It's just performance management out is the struggle, I think. Like, I've been performance managed out of, I think, 2 jobs I've had,
Yeah.
which I really enjoyed. But I think the anxiety around sick days, calling in sick, requesting
Mhm.
flexibility, and then I don't know about you, but personally, I will like overachieve or overwork to try and prove my value or my worth at that job so that when I do need to call in sick, I'm less likely to feel guilty about it.
Like I'm always tend to be quite a good employee, and everyone likes, like, I pick things up really quick, and I do think that helps. But yeah, people still push you out once they figure out you're going to be too difficult.
Well, that's it. You go in the too hard basket. You don't fit in with
Yeah.
the Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 notion. And I think it's been challenging as well watching the workscape change around COVID because, before COVID, flexible work and hybrid work were like miracle rare jobs. And then suddenly overnight,
Literally.
everything was. And now so many places are trying to force people back into the workplace, and these flexible
Yeah.
opportunities are becoming difficult to come across or to keep a hold of. Um, in your current circumstances, you're 100% work from home, aren't you?
No, it's hybrid. 2 days a week
Hybrid.
from home. I think I could do completely from home, but it's not possible with that job.
I think too, there's an element of that social connection as well, being able to go into an office and see
Yeah.
people and bounce off them. How do you reckon you would go if you did convert to full-time work from home?
Yeah. I think it would be amazing. I would love that. That's like the dream. Like, I do really like talking to people, but I also find like workplaces and corporate games, I'm going to call them games because I feel like it is games. Like, I find it exhausting and I don't like it. Like, I've gotten in trouble for my honesty in the past.
Same.
People don't like people don't like it. And like, I don't want to pretend to be nice to people that don't treat you with respect. I don't want to like do like I if I like you and we get along, I will talk to you, but I don't want to do a little small chit chat about like
Small
the
talk's
weather.
hard. I struggle with
Like,
that too.
I just don't care. Like, I don't want to do it. And there's like can be a lot of games. So I think I would like remote, and then I could just have a little schedule. Like, I could do some yoga in the morning and sleep in and drink my coffee on the couch. I just feel like it would be
Yeah,
very
and I
nice.
guess that way too, you can change your day to suit your needs on that
Yeah.
day. I find that,
Yeah.
I'm working from home full time now. I only recently transitioned from hybrid, and it was a struggle initially because I feel that I can sometimes be more productive in environments when I have other people to bounce off. But by the same token, you can be
Yeah.
less productive very quickly because you get caught up.
Oh, yeah, I'm less productive in the office. Yeah, 100%. I sit next to one of my team leaders, and like the other day we talked
Yeah.
for like 2 hours. It's like we didn't do
No, and
anything.
that's
Like
the thing.
I definitely get more stuff done
You
at
can, but
home.
I think the struggle I have is just you don't have someone that you can just bounce off really quick. Like if you come off a bad phone call or something happens,
Yeah,
you can't turn around and be like, guess what just happened? You kind of have to hope someone's available on
yeah,
chat or they have the time to take a call. So there's pros and cons that come with everything, I think. And for
yeah,
people like us, having that flexibility is the major benefit. And I think the draw card and the biggest factor that when you weigh your pros and cons up, that comes into play. Um, I suppose on the other side of that too, how do you find your social interactions have been since having your diagnosis? You've had these things for life and you've struggled with them through your life, but do
yeah.
you think it's impacted your relationships or friendships since you've had those diagnoses applied?
Relationship and friendships, no. I think, yeah, like the biggest impact would be in the workplace. Like people, I just find people in the workplace, they don't want your honesty. Like they want to talk to you, but they don't want to hear about how miserable your life is. Like it just gets very awkward very quickly. They're like, oh no, you poor little disabled girl. Terrible.
Pat pat on the
Like
head.
it just gets awkward. But I think in interactions everywhere else, it's fine. I think I am not awkward about it. And I have seen that come across on other people that I've spent time with, whether it's like I go to a aerial class with them and I see them every now and then. And have seen like other people start to talk about their chronic illnesses and disabilities more. I think it's only awkward and bad if you make like I think if you just keep going on with it, you keep talking about it, whether you're joking about it, just making little comments about it, and like other people will catch on. And I think if they're still uncomfortable, they don't like it, then like don't hang around them.
I agree with that too. And I think too, on that note, being open and honest about what's actually happening in your world helps other
Yeah.
people interact with you even more,
Yeah.
if anything. And I think if you're around people who are very close minded and shut down conversation like that, I mean, look, there's a time and a place for everything. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying that, you shouldn't openly talk about these sorts of
No.
things because you absolutely should.
Yeah.
But there are some settings, I suppose, where it can make people more or less uncomfortable depending on
Yeah.
circumstances.
Yeah.
Um, so I think you're right, like opening up conversation and just talking about it, which is what we're doing here,
Yeah. Yeah.
is
And
is
it's
important.
not like I don't go on like big spiels, but like I'm very sarcastic, so I'll just like make jokes
Look, dark
about
humor
it.
is the
And
only way to survive with chronic health
I
issues,
know.
man.
And I'll just mention it, or just be like, oh, I'm really tired today, or this, like very small comments about it. And I think people just get used to it. And I think, yeah, like I've 100% noticed people will then go, oh, it is okay to talk about. Like if she's talking about it,
It
it's
just
fine.
opens the floor. It opens the floor
Yeah,
for more conversation, and then you might learn something about them as well. You never know.
literally.
I have another one for you. What advice would you give to other people on a diagnosis journey or who are struggling with the same or similar conditions to you, based on your own experience?
I think there's a couple things. I think the first thing is like you're not a doctor, but you know your body better than anyone else. Like getting fibromyalgia diagnosis, like I knew that yes, it matched, but it wasn't right because I knew that there was like 90, like a million other things going on. And also like you've just got to press on. And I think it's really exhausting. Like it's exhausting having to go to multiple doctors and advocate for yourself. But like at this stage, that's unfortunately just what you have to do. I basically, EDS has a diagnosis criteria. And when a rheumatologist refused to do it with me, I just found another doctor and was like, you're going to do this with me. And yeah, like he could have technically said no, though I wasn't really giving him much choice. But you just kind of have to keep pushing on. And it sucks. Like it's not fun having to be basically your main provider of care, finding the right doctors and Googling and doing research. But I think you just got to advocate for yourself and know that you know yourself better than anyone, no matter how long they've spent in med school or how much experience they have.
And I think on top of that too, like how much can you really know about someone based on a 15-minute consultation?
Not
There's
much.
so many layers, and I completely agree with you. You've got to sometimes just put your foot down. And I think one of the things that I found was actually from another person in the disabled community who I spoke to, who said if you ask them to write down that they refuse to do something,
Mm,
magically they'll do
yeah.
it.
Yeah. They don't want to admit like that they didn't try. Um, yeah, it's just fortunate. I have found like, I know this isn't the case for everyone. I personally found that younger doctors, at least in GPs, are better. I've found that older doctors are like in GPs, they're just very close-minded. I think they've been seeing people with colds for 30 years, and now they're just like, they really do not expect anything rare or unusual at all. And I know that there's some great older doctors out there, but I personally have found that all the younger doctors I've seen have been the best doctors, and they've been much more open-minded to other things and to doing research and learning, even if they don't know exactly what you have or what it could be.
I have to agree with you there. I've had the same experience, and I find even some of the older doctors I've engaged with, the ones that have been most helpful have been the ones that have been involved with learning, like ongoing learning,
Yeah. Yeah.
actively being involved in what's going on in their communities, going back to do different work with universities, things like that. It's so hard to find a good doctor, though. It can be really, really hard. And finally, to wrap us up, what are some of your current projects or initiatives related to chronic health and disability advocacy? And how can listeners get involved or support your
Yeah.
work?
So obviously I am signed with Champion Health Agency and the amazing Anya. And there's this podcast, which I would love to get back to once a week at some point, although don't cross your fingers it's going to happen in the next couple of months. Um, obviously, so like listening to the podcast, listening to people's stories, I think just listening to people in general is obviously something that you can do to support people with disability and advocacy in general. And as a little like fun side thing, I just started doing Chronically Rosy, which is at the moment just stickers, but like disabled themed items. And my brain's just always going, so I always doing stuff. But I think, yeah, most of this podcast, and you can find it Sick of It podcast, and me, I'm Raimy_Rose on Instagram and on LinkedIn. I've been trying to get into LinkedIn more.
LinkedIn's a fun place to be. Hey,
It is.
it's difficult to get an audience, but it builds.
It's just like LinkedIn is such a good opportunity. Sometimes I hate it because it can be a bit cheesy, and I really hate the cheesiness. But it's really good. Like I made a post about the podcast, and then 2 days later it was in the news article, like the podcast. And I know that they found it from that post. So I think
LinkedIn.
it's important to do networking.
It is. I think there was one other thing too that I saw recently on your LinkedIn. We can buy you a coffee now.
Yeah, you can buy us coffee now. I don't make money for the podcast. Surprise. Yeah, you do not have to. We do have a buy me a coffee link if you would like to support the podcast. You absolutely do not have to, especially considering the economy, inflation. But if you would like to, while at this stage while the podcast is not making money, that would be very much appreciated.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Raimy. It's been lovely talking with you as always. What's next?
For me or for us?
You tell me.
What's next is Megan is going to be on the podcast
Woohoo.
occasionally as a host because we have good flow.
We have good flow.
We do have good flow. Yeah, I feel like
Exciting.
that's kind of the
That's
end.
kind of the end.
Also reply.